What if I told you that the horror of Five Nights at Freddy's isn't entirely fiction? What if a real-life tragedy in 1993 eerily mirrored the game's nightmare scenario? Picture this: a children's restaurant, animatronics performing cheerful songs, and a night that ended in bloodshed. This isn't just a story about pixels and jump scares. It's about a real event where a killer turned a family entertainment center into a scene of unimaginable horror. A chilling tale that may have inspired the game we know today. Are you ready to uncover the dark truth behind the bright lights? Intro today, we dive into a story that blurs the line between fiction and reality. It's about Nathan Dunlap, the man behind a massacre at a Chuck E. Cheese that shocked the world. A place meant for joy became a site of terror, and animatronics once seen as playful turned into haunting witnesses to a crime. This isn't just a tale of tragedy. It's a glimpse into how darkness can hide in the most unexpected places. Let's unravel the night that changed everything and explore the chilling parallels to one of the biggest horror franchises ever made. Nathan Dunlap's story begins in Waukegan, Illinois, where he was born in the early 1970s. From his very first breath, chaos and instability would be his constant companions. His mother, Carol, was struggling with severe mental illness, what would later be diagnosed as bipolar disorder. When Nathan was just an infant, in one of her disturbed states, she did the unthinkable. She threw him in the trash. Shortly after Nathan's birth, Carol was hospitalized in Waukegan, and young Nathan, along with his sister Adonea, was sent to a foster home. This would set the pattern for his early years, a childhood marked by constant upheaval, moving from Illinois to Michigan, and finally to Colorado in 1984, when Nathan was 10 years old. But the horror of Nathan's childhood wasn't just in the instability. His mother's untreated mental illness manifested in terrifying ways. Nathan would sometimes wake at 3 a.m. to find his mother shrieking, raving, and stacking their belongings on the lawn. She would walk around the house period, behavior that would later in furniture for days, take a dozen baths in a 24-hour period, behavior that would later be recognized as manic episodes. Then there was Jerry Dunlap, a man of the church they called him, a Baptist minister who married Carol just 6 months after Nathan was born. He was nearly 400 pounds, and his size was intimidating, his shadow looming over everything. But the real darkness he brought wasn't just his physical presence. It was the kind of fear that gripped the entire house. Their home wasn't a sanctuary. It was a prison. Violence came out of nowhere, for no reason at all. One minute, everything was quiet. The next, chaos would explode. People who saw it couldn't forget the horror. A huge man dragging a little boy into a Burger King bathroom, followed by the sickening sound of thuds against the walls. There was also the time he threw Nathan down a flight of stairs, as if he were nothing more than a rag doll. Or when Jerry stood over him in school hallways, slamming his small body into lockers. But the most disturbing part, it all happened under the guise of a godly family. Their terrible secret was hidden in plain sight, wrapped in the safety of religious respectability. But everything changed the day Nathan was 15. It started with a noise from the basement, maybe laughter, maybe crying, that pulled him down the stairs. What he found there would break him, shatter his world in ways he never saw coming. There was his sister Adonea, his protector, the one who always stood between him and Jerry's rage. And there was Jerry, his father, doing things that no man of God, no father, should ever do to a child. When Adonea saw her brother's frozen silhouette at the bottom of the stairs, she forced a smile through her terror. "We're just playing," she said, her voice trembling with a lie meant to shield her little brother one more time. But you can't unsee such things. You can't unknown such truths. After that day, something changed in Jerry's eyes when he looked at Nathan. The violence took on a different edge, sharp with secrets and unspoken threats. Each blow seemed to carry a message: keep quiet, or else. The beast that lived inside Jerry Dunlap, hidden behind his ministerial collar, had been exposed. And like all monsters, when their masks slip, it only made him more dangerous. It was around this same time that Nathan learned another shattering truth. Jerry wasn't his biological father at all. The man whose name he carried, the man who beat him, the man who was destroying his family, was a stranger. The revelation sent 15-year-old Nathan into a spiral. His behavior began to change. The abuse he suffered at home began to manifest in violence on the streets of Aurora. At 15, he committed several robberies, first using a golf club as a weapon, then graduating to guns. He appeared in juvenile court, where the system offered him a chance at rehabilitation. Instead, he fell deeper into a life of crime, selling drugs and running with a gang that specialized in quick-hit robberies. 1993 was a particularly troubled year. Nathan was arrested 5 times on misdemeanor charges. But between these brushes with the law, he managed to land a job at Chuck E. Cheese. For a brief moment, it seemed like he might find stability. That spring, something remarkable happened. While his mother and Jerry were in Tennessee working on their marriage, Nathan stayed with a family friend named Benton Jordan. For a few precious weeks, Nathan experienced what a normal life could be like. Jordan gave him chores, treated him like one of his own children, provided the structure and stability Nathan had never known. Jordan recalls a particular moment that haunts him to this day. He had assigned Nathan the task of staining the deck. Watching from a window, Jordan saw the teenager pause in his work, carefully scoop something up, and gently set it aside. When asked about it later, Nathan explained he had moved a beetle to safety, not wanting to harm it with the polyurethane stain. But this glimpse of normalcy wouldn't last. That brings us to that night. Nathan Dunlap is 19 years old. From the outside, he seems like any other teenager. Lanky, all elbows and knees, with 2 big brown eyes above hollowed cheeks and a mouth that twists in a half-smile. But behind that ordinary facade lies a troubled mind, shaped by years of abuse and instability. Dunlap had started working at Chuck E. Cheese that May. He was hired as a cook, a dough master as they called it, but his employment wouldn't last long. After a dispute over extra hours, he was fired. To most teenagers, losing a fast food job would be a minor setback. But for Nathan, with his history of abuse, abandonment, and mental illness, it became an obsession. That summer, he told a former co-worker about his plans for revenge. "I'm going to get even," he said. The threat seemed empty at the time, just another angry ex-employee venting his frustrations. But Dunlap's mind was already spinning with darker thoughts. December 14th, 1993. The sun has set early, as it does during Colorado winters. The Chuck E. Cheese restaurant in Aurora is winding down for the night. Its sign glows in the parking lot, its neon lights reflecting off patches of dirty snow. Inside, families are finishing their meals, children's laughter mixing with the constant din of arcade games. And 5 employees are going through their closing routines, unaware that this ordinary Tuesday evening will become their last. Margaret Kohlberg, the 50-year-old night manager, is in her office counting the day's receipts. Sylvia Crowell, 19, is cleaning the salad bar. Ben Grant, 17, vacuums the carpet, the machines whirring, mixing with the arcade sounds. Colleen O'Connor, 17, moves around the dining area, her mind drifting to thoughts of the car her parents are giving her for Christmas. Bobby Stevens, 20, scrubs the kitchen, grateful for the extra hours to buy presents for his 7-month-old son. Earlier that evening, around 9 p.m., Nathan Dunlap had walked into the restaurant. He's wearing a jacket, gloves with holes cut out at the knuckles, and a baseball cap perched backward on his head. To anyone watching, he looks like any other teenager coming to play games. No one notices how his eyes scan the restaurant, taking in every detail, every exit, every employee. He approaches the counter, orders a ham and cheese sandwich. His voice is steady, casual. The same counter where he once stood as an employee, making food for others. Now he's just another customer. He takes his sandwich to a table with a clear view of the dining room. Methodically, he eats while watching the staff go about their duties. After finishing his meal, Nathan Dunlap heads to the arcade. There's a cruel twist of irony in the game he picks. Hogan's Alley, a game where players use a plastic gun to shoot at pop-up targets. For a few minutes, he practices his aim, the fake gun clicking in his hand. Some employees notice him and wave politely. He nods back, pretending to be just another customer. But underneath his jacket, the real gun, the one that would soon bring terror, sits heavily in his pocket. What no one knows is that he's been planning this moment for weeks. It's not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It's cold and calculated. At 9:45 p.m., the restaurant starts to quiet down. A family birthday party is wrapping up, parents bundling their kids against the cold night air. Nathan calmly walks to the bathroom just like he's done 100 times before. But this time, he's not coming back. Inside the cramped bathroom, he waits. Time seems to drag on, the minutes feeling like hours. He can hear everything, the vacuum cleaner buzzing, dishes clinking, and the fading sounds of the arcade. The animatronics continue their endless loop of cheerful songs, oblivious to the horror about to unfold. At 10:05 p.m., the night shift falls into routine. Margaret Kohlberg, the 50-year-old night manager, says goodbye to the last customers. Sylvia Crowell, 19, starts cleaning the salad bar, probably thinking about her classes at Metro State tomorrow. Ben Grant, 17, begins his nightly vacuuming. Colleen O'Connor, also 17, is excited about the car her parents are giving her, a surprise she'd just talked to her mom about earlier. In the kitchen, Bobby Stevens, 20, scrubs the dishes, his thoughts on his 7-month-old son at home. Then, Dunlap emerges from the bathroom. The restaurant is nearly empty now. The animatronic characters continue their performance in the dimly lit dining room, casting eerie shadows on the walls with their mechanical movements. Nathan moves silently across the floor, the .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol gripped tightly in his hand. He approaches Sylvia first, who's cleaning the salad bar. She doesn't hear him coming. The bullet enters near her left ear. Dunlap looks away as she falls. He can't stomach the sight of blood. He moves quickly to where Ben is vacuuming. The teenager doesn't even have time to turn around. The vacuum cleaner continues running as Ben crumples to the ground. Colleen sees him coming. Their eyes meet across the room, and in that moment, understanding floods her face. She drops to her knees, hands raised in desperate plea. The girl who just hours ago was excitedly talking about her new car is now begging for her life. "Don't shoot," she pleads, her voice barely a whisper. "I won't tell." His response comes with terrible finality. "I have to." In the kitchen, Bobby Stevens hears the shots but dismisses them as balloons popping, a fatal mistake. When Nathan bursts through the kitchen door, their eyes meet briefly. Bobby starts to say hello, a reflex from their days working together. The gun raises. The bullet tears through Bobby's jaw, but somehow he survives. He falls, playing dead, listening as Nathan's footsteps move toward the manager's office. Blood pools around him as he lies perfectly still, afraid even to breathe. Margaret Kohlberg is still counting receipts when Nathan enters her office. Unlike the others, she has time to realize what's happening. She follows his instructions, opens the safe. Perhaps years of customer service training kick in, because her last words are heartbreakingly polite. "Thank you." The whole sequence takes less than 5 minutes. 6 shell casings dot the floor like bloody breadcrumbs. Nathan fills a bag with game tokens, keychains, cards, and $1,591 in cash. As he leaves, the animatronic characters continue their show, singing their cheerful songs to an audience of the dead and dying. And here's where reality becomes more terrifying than any video game. That's what the police found when they got there. The first responders are moving through the darkened restaurant, following trails of blood, while robotic animals sing and dance, their shadows casting eerie patterns on the walls. The year is 1993. These aren't the sophisticated animatronics we know today. These are crude, mechanical beings, their movements jerky, their synthetic voices scratching through speakers, creating a soundtrack for a real-life horror scene. The police found Dunlap just hours later at his girlfriend's apartment. They were making love when his pager went off, a message from his mother, relaying that the police wanted to talk to him. Before meeting with them, he showered and washed his hands with hydrogen peroxide, then stashed some of the stolen money under a freezer. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bobby Stevens had survived and could identify him. The police found gunshot residue on his hands. Within 12 hours of the murders, Nathan Dunlap was in custody. The trial revealed the full scope of the horror. Dunlap had planned everything meticulously. He chose a Tuesday night because it would be quiet. He knew the layout perfectly from his time as an employee. He had even practiced at the shooting game Hogan's Alley earlier that evening, as if warming up for what was to come. In 1996, Nathan Dunlap was sentenced to death for the murders of Margaret Kohlberg, Sylvia Crowell, Ben Grant, and Colleen O'Connor. Today, he sits on death row in Colorado, the only state prisoner in such a position, still waiting for his final fate. The Chuck E. Cheese massacre stands as one of the most chilling chapters in American true crime history. While we can't definitively say it inspired Five Nights at Freddy's, the similarities are striking. Scott Cawthon, the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, has repeatedly stated that his game story came purely from his imagination, that the tale of haunted animatronics and murdered children sprang from his own creative mind, and perhaps that's true. But the parallels are impossible to ignore. A disgruntled former employee returning for revenge, the late-night murders in a family entertainment center, the animatronic characters continuing their performance as death walked the halls. Even the year 1993 coincides with the timeline of the game's lore. More than 30 years have passed since that December night. The Aurora Chuck E. Cheese has long since closed its doors, replaced by another business that gives no hint of the horrors that once unfolded there. But somewhere in Colorado's death row, Nathan Dunlap still waits, still breathes, still lives with the weight of what he did. The courts continue to debate his fate. Appeals drag on. The execution chamber remains empty. But one day, perhaps soon, they'll come for him. They'll strap him to a table, insert the needles, and watch as the lethal cocktail of drugs stops his heart. But in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, death isn't always the end, is it? The souls of the victims become one with the machines, their spirits trapped in mechanical bodies, forever haunting the place of their demise. So perhaps we should ask, when Nathan Dunlap's heart finally stops beating, where will his soul go? Will it seek out the cold embrace of mechanical arms, metal joints, and glowing eyes?